My name is Anna Kensington, and I'm 31 years old. People love to say that childhood shapes you, your voice, your wounds, the way you brace yourself before anyone raises theirs. I didn't understand any of that growing up. All I knew was that somehow, in the quiet architecture of our family, my older sister Nora was built into the centerpiece, and I was whatever was left over. But before I continue, please like, share, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that sound dramatic until you're the one living them. I grew up in a two-story house in Seattle, in a neighborhood where every driveway reflected the same Pacific Northwest drizzle, and every family pretended to be fine. From the moment I formed memories, Nora was the golden child. My parents, Karen and Greg Kensington, treated her like a prodigy, a future leader, a gift. And me? I was the backup plan, the extra pair of hands, the daughter who shouldn't make things harder. Nora is 3 years older than me, and in our home, 3 years might as well have been a royal title. Her bedroom was twice the size of mine. She got new gadgets every year, TVs, tablets, whatever she wanted. When she wanted violin lessons, my parents hired a private instructor who came to our house in Ballard. 2 months later, Nora decided violin was too boring, and everyone acted like the abandoned lessons and the money were nothing. Meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs from my cousins and got library books for Christmas, while Nora unwrapped the newest iPhone. When I asked for piano lessons, my mom sighed and said, "Sweetheart, we can't afford luxuries right now." She said that 2 weeks after they bought Nora a $600 drone that she crashed into Lake Washington the first day she flew it. By 8 years old, I was helping out in ways no child should be responsible for. My mom decided I needed to learn responsibility, so I cooked simple meals, folded laundry, and cleaned the bathroom I shared with Nora. By 12, I was doing my own laundry, making dinner 3 nights a week, and vacuuming the house every Saturday morning. Nora's weekly household chore? Taking out the trash on Sundays? Sometimes. Whenever I wanted to have friends over, my mom would say, "Anna, your sister needs quiet to study." But Nora could throw parties that left the house trashed, and my parents would laugh about teenage energy while handing me garbage bags to help clean up. My dad was the same. He never missed a single one of Nora's soccer games at Roosevelt High. Rain or shine, he was there on the sidelines with a thermos and a camera. When I joined the debate team and made it to the state championship in Olympia, he said he had to work. I found out later he spent the day fishing at Puget Sound. You'd think these moments wouldn't stick, but they do. They all do. The imbalance seeped into every corner of our lives. When Nora turned 16, my parents bought her a used Honda Civic. Nothing fancy, but it was her own set of wheels. When I turned 16, my mother handed me a stack of bus schedules. "Public transportation builds character," she said, smiling as if she'd given me a gift. Nora wrecked her car twice, once backing into a pole, once side-swiping someone in a Safeway parking lot. Both times, my parents paid for the repairs without a single lecture. When I asked to borrow my mom's car for a job interview in Bellevue, she said she might need it and spent the whole day at home watching Oprah. Birthdays were the clearest reflection of where we stood in their hearts. Nora's birthdays were events, rented venues, catered food, half her school invited. Mine were acknowledged with a last-minute cake from QFC and maybe dinner at Applebee's. One year, they forgot entirely. When I reminded them 3 days later, my mom snapped, "Anna, we've been so busy helping Nora with her college applications. Don't be selfish." I learned something that day. You can be invisible even while standing right in front of people. College brought the truth into the light, sharp and undeniable. My parents had been contributing to a college fund for years, something they proudly announced during every family gathering. When Nora graduated from Roosevelt High, they handed her a check for $45,000. She went to the University of Washington, partied in the Greek system, failed most of her classes, and dropped out. The money vanished. When it was my turn, I asked about my college fund. My mother looked uncomfortable. "Well, honey, we helped Nora get back on her feet. She needed a new car and first month's rent in Capitol Hill. She's been struggling." "You used my college fund for her?" I asked. "It's not like that," my dad insisted. "We're a family. We help each other. You can take out loans. It'll teach you responsibility." Responsibility. That word again. Always meant for me, never for her. I worked 2 jobs while studying at Seattle Pacific University. Coffee by day, data entry by night. I graduated with honors and $30,000 in debt. Nora bounced between jobs. never lasting more than 8 months anywhere, but my parents kept slipping her money behind closed doors. After graduation, I got a junior position at a digital marketing agency downtown. I moved into a tiny apartment in Fremont. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My parents visited once. My mom spent the entire time talking about how Nora's figuring things out and how hard it is for young women these days. It was the same script, the same blindness, the same roles we'd been assigned before we even knew who we were. But something changed when I met Evan. He was gentle, patient, a software engineer with a grounded presence that felt like stability for the first time in my life. He saw me, not the version my parents painted, not the second choice daughter, not the backup plan, just me. We got engaged at Cary Park with the skyline glittering behind us. I was so excited to share the news with my family. My mom's first words were, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Nora might be getting promoted?" Nora was working as a sales associate at Best Buy. Her promotion was to assistant manager. Planning my wedding became a battlefield of subtle dismissals. My mom kept suggesting things like, "Make it smaller, Anna. Weddings are so expensive. You don't need flowers on every table. Maybe skip the live music." Meanwhile, Nora called 4 months into her relationship with her boyfriend Tyler. She was pregnant. My parents threw her a lavish baby shower in Bellevue, gifted her and Tyler $10,000 to help them start their family, and didn't contribute a single dollar to my wedding. They attended my ceremony late. They'd lost track of time, helping Nora move into a bigger apartment. At the reception, my mom spent half the night on the phone with Nora, who didn't even bother showing up. It was one thing after another, one dismissal after another, one wound after another. Yet nothing could prepare me for what was coming, the moment that would split my life cleanly into before and after. And it started with a phone call. My mother was sick, and none of us were ready for the storm that diagnosis would unleash. When my mother, Karen Kensington, was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, it felt like the air left the room. I remember sitting in the sterile office at Swedish Medical Center, staring at the CT scans on the monitor, bright white spots blooming across the dark image like frost on a window. She looked so small when the doctor explained everything, so fragile, so suddenly breakable. And despite everything she had done, or failed to do, I felt my heart fold in on itself. I rearranged my entire life, because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I changed my work schedule at the agency, negotiated remote days, and told my boss I needed flexibility. I meal prepped on Sundays, chicken broth, smoothies, bland foods she could keep down. I reorganized her medication, created a chart, and taped it to her fridge. I drove her to chemotherapy at 7 a.m. 3 days a week, sitting beside her while the IV line pumped cold poison through her veins. I watched her lose her hair, her appetite, her energy, pieces of the woman I grew up desperately wanting to be loved by. And through all of it, my sister Nora visited maybe once a month. She always had excuses. Tyler needed help at home. The baby was fussy. Her job was stressful. Traffic was terrible. She'd show up with a bouquet she'd clearly bought on the way over, stay for 45 minutes, take a few photos for social media, and leave. My parents, of course, defended her. "She has so much on her plate," Mom would sigh. "Nora's trying," Dad would insist. "You know how hard she works." Which made me want to laugh, or scream, or both. Because I was the one losing sleep. The one juggling work, caregiving, and my own life. The one cleaning their house in Ballard on Friday nights instead of going out like other 30-somethings. The one carrying the weight of their survival. While Nora breezed in like a guest star with perfect lighting and a rehearsed smile. Still, I kept going. I told myself, this is what good daughters do. They show up, they help, they don't complain, they don't ask for anything in return. But deep down, something inside me was straining, stretched thin, threadbare. If my life were a movie, this is the part where the audience would start whispering, "She's going to snap. She can't keep doing this." And they'd be right. 6 months into treatment, after radiation had finished and the chemo had taken its toll, my mother went into remission. We all breathed easier. My father insisted on celebrating. He chose Canlis, one of the nicest restaurants in Seattle. White tablecloths, soft lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline like a postcard. I wanted the dinner to be a moment of relief, a moment where, maybe just once, the years of imbalance would melt away. But some patterns are carved too deep. The night was warm and clear, the view over Lake Union shimmering like glass. Evan sat beside me, his hand reassuring on my knee under the table. Nora was across from us, scrolling her phone between bites. My parents sat side by side, flushed with champagne and gratitude. When the waiter refilled our glasses, my dad stood, tapping his spoon lightly against his glass. I want to thank everyone for supporting Karen through this difficult time, he began. My heart fluttered, hopeful. Especially Nora, he continued, turning to her with a soft smile. She always knew how to make her mother smile. It was like the fork fell from my hand in slow motion. It clattered loudly against the plate, echoing in the quiet dining room. Surely he didn't mean that. Surely I misheard. I looked at Nora, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, and then at my parents, who beamed at her like she'd carried the entire weight of Mom's illness on her back. Finally, I found my voice. Dad, I said softly, I was here 3 times a week for 6 months. My mom waved a hand dismissively. We know, Anna, and we appreciate it, but Nora's visits always lifted my spirits. Nora's 7 visits. 7. I felt heat surge up my spine, something primal and electric. Nora, I asked, how many times did you come during Mom's treatment? I don't know, she muttered. I came when I could. 7 times, I said. You came 7 times. Dad's jaw tightened. Anna, don't make this a competition. A competition? My voice cracked. I lost 15 pounds. I barely slept. I rearranged my entire life. Don't speak to your sister that way, Mom snapped. She has important things to do. Important? I laughed. Sharp, bitter, hollow. She didn't visit for 6 months. Enough, Dad barked. Nora is coming to the house tomorrow and you will apologize to her. Apologize. To the person who let me burn while she watched from a distance. I stood so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. Evan reached for my hand, but I was already shaking. I'm done, I whispered. I've spent my entire life being your backup daughter, your helper, your afterthought. I put everything on hold for 6 months, and you can't even acknowledge it. Sit down, Dad ordered, his face flushing red. No, I said. I'm leaving. Don't call me unless it's an emergency, and don't expect me at Sunday dinners anymore. I walked out of Canlis into the cool Seattle night. Evan followed, wrapping his arms around me as I broke, really broke, for the first time in years. The lights blurred as we drove across the bridge back to West Seattle, like the city itself was crying with me. The next day, the calls began. My mother sobbed that I'd ruined her celebration. My father raged that I was dramatic and selfish. Nora texted, real mature, Anna. I blocked every number except for emergencies. Weeks passed, months. Evan held me through the nightmares. Therapy helped me name the things I'd buried. I started to find pieces of myself underneath the wreckage of years spent trying to earn what should have been freely given. And then, just when the wounds started closing, Nora's name appeared on my phone in missed calls. Once, twice, 5 times. Then a voicemail. Anna, it's serious. Call me back, please. I froze, because some words crack open the past like a fault line. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And I knew, before I even returned the call, that the story I'd tried to walk away from wasn't done with me. When I finally called Nora back, her voice was shaky, thin in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids. It's Dad, she said. He had a massive heart attack. He's at Swedish. They don't know if he's going to make it. For a moment, the world narrowed into a single, piercing note, like someone had struck a tuning fork inside my chest. Despite everything, despite decades of wounds and silence, the thought of losing my father made my stomach drop. Evan grabbed the keys. I didn't even put on a coat. The drive to Swedish Medical Center felt like sprinting through fog. Seattle's sky was an oppressive gray, the kind that pressed against the windshield like a warning. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Evan kept glancing at me, silently offering comfort he knew I couldn't take yet. In the ICU, machines beeped with mechanical regularity. My father lay unconscious, tubes snaking from his arms, his chest rising with the help of a ventilator. He looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen him. My mother was a wreck, puffy-eyed, trembling, clutching a crumpled tissue like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. Nora stood stiffly by the window, arms folded, staring out at the blurred skyline. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Mom rushed toward me. Anna, she cried, I can't do this alone. He's going to need help, appointments, medications, therapy, everything. There it was. The moment I'd known would come. The expectation settling into the room like dust. I swallowed hard. Mom, he's going to need care. Yes, but Nora lives closer. She should coordinate most of it. Nora's head snapped toward me. Excuse me? You live 20 minutes away, I said evenly. I'm in West Seattle, and I have a full-time job. You need to step up. Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. Nora has a child, a household, a job. She has more responsibilities. And I don't? My voice cracked, not from anger, but from exhaustion. The doctor entered before the argument could escalate. Dad had stabilized enough for emergency surgery, a bypass. The next 48 hours were critical. After the doctor left, the three of us sat in that cold waiting room, each lost in separate storms. Later that night, Dad woke briefly. His voice was barely a whisper. Anna, I need you. It would have been so easy to fold right there, to fall back into the familiar role. Caretaker, fixer, the daughter who erases herself for the sake of the family. But therapy had given me a backbone I never had before. Dad, I whispered, I'll be here, I'll help, but I won't do everything, not again. His eyelids drooped, too weak to answer. The next week was chaos condensed into hours. Nora tried to manage Dad's care, on paper, anyway. In reality, it was a disaster. She forgot to refill one of his cardiac medications at Walgreens. She missed an appointment at the rehab center because she thought it was next Wednesday. She left a voicemail for the cardiologist, but forgot to actually send the paperwork needed for follow-up care. By day 4, my mother was calling me 3 times a day, frantic. Nora says the doctor didn't tell her the dosage. Could you call and check? Nora didn't understand the physical therapy exercises. Nora is overwhelmed. You're so much better at this than she is. Evan watched the way my shoulders curled inward every time my phone lit up. You don't have to answer, he kept saying. You don't owe them everything. But the guilt, that old familiar ghost, kept whispering. Finally, the breaking point came when Dad was readmitted after his blood pressure spiked dangerously high. The nurse spoke to Nora in a tone I recognized, the tone adults use on children who should know better. You cannot skip these medications, the nurse said sternly. Your father's recovery depends on consistency. Nora's face flushed scarlet. I didn't skip anything. You forgot his evening dose twice, the nurse interrupted gently but firmly. This could have killed him. Mom looked like the ground had been ripped out from under her. For the first time in my life, she turned to Nora with disappointment in her eyes. Nora started, voice cracking. I just got confused. Mom pressed her hands to her forehead. Anna never got confused during my treatment. It was a small sentence, a quiet one, but it cracked the foundation of 30 years of favoritism like lightning splitting a tree. Nora sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel vindicated. Watching my sister crumble under the weight of responsibilities I'd carried alone for years didn't feel victorious. It felt sad and brutally honest. Over the next month, Dad recovered slowly. For the first time, my parents began asking me questions. Not commands, not expectations, actual questions. How are things at work, Anna? How are you and Evan doing? What are your plans this summer? My father, always proud, always stone-faced, took my hand during one visit. His palm trembled slightly. I see it now, he said quietly. What you did for your mother, what you're doing now. You show up. You always have. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received from him. My mother changed too. She called me one evening, her voice soft. I didn't realize, she said. I didn't see how much we leaned on you, how much we ignored what you needed. I thought Nora needed more help. I thought you were fine. I was never fine, I said gently. A long pause, then, I'm sorry, Anna. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Meanwhile, Nora's life unraveled in ways she couldn't hide anymore. Her boyfriend Tyler, exhausted from carrying their household alone while Nora was always helping her parents, broke up with her. He filed for expanded custody of their son. He left a note on her counter that read, I can't do this anymore, not like this. It sent her spiraling. Her hours were cut at work. Bills piled up. Her apartment became too expensive. And eventually, inevitably, Nora moved back into our parents' house at age 41. The golden child returning to the nest she'd never truly left. For a moment, watching all of this unfold, I wondered if this was karma, or simply consequences finally catching up. But the truth, it wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. For the first time, my parents saw our family as it truly was, not the illusion they'd clung to for decades, but the truth I had lived since childhood. Dad recovering, Mom apologizing, Nora collapsing under expectations she'd never been taught to carry. And me, the daughter who always showed up, standing at the center of a story I had never been the protagonist of until now. What I didn't know was that the hardest confrontation was still ahead, a final collision point that would force me to choose who I was and who I refused to be anymore. My father had been home from the hospital for 2 months when the final shift happened. Not loud, not explosive, but subtle, in a way that told me the ground beneath us had already been cracking for years. I stopped by their Ballard house one weekend to drop off some extra supplements my dad's cardiologist had recommended. Evan stayed in the car, giving me space. It had been our arrangement lately. He was close by, always available, but he understood that walking back into my childhood home was like stepping into a battlefield lined with invisible tripwires. Inside, the house smelled like disinfectant and microwave dinners. My dad sat in his recliner, a blanket over his legs, reading glasses low on his nose. He looked older than his 64 years. Fragile, but sharper somehow. Like nearly dying, had focused his vision. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Nora. She lingered in the doorway, her hair pulled into a messy bun, the exhaustion in her face carved like grief, or guilt, or both. "We need to talk," she said softly. I set the supplements down on the counter. "About what?" Her eyes were glassy. "About everything." I didn't respond, so she continued. "I know you think I never cared," she said, voice trembling. "But I didn't realize how much you were doing until I had to do it myself, and I'm sorry, Anna. I really am." Silence stretched between us, thick, heavy, suffocating. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who begged me to braid her hair before school, the one who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who genuinely believed we were equals long before our parents taught us otherwise. But adulthood had reshaped us into strangers. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, "but I don't forgive you." Her expression crumpled. "Anna, come on, we're sisters." "We're sisters," I agreed, "but you watched me drown for decades and said nothing. You watched me work 2 jobs through college while you partied away my college fund. You watched me take care of Mom alone. You let me burn out trying to keep this family afloat." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was young. I didn't know better." "You were old enough to know what fairness looks like," I said quietly. "Old enough to know what kindness is. But you were happy benefiting from the system that kept me small." Nora flinched like the words physically landed on her. "I'm trying to change," she whispered. "I know," I said gently. "But you're only trying now because your life fell apart, not because you saw me suffering." The truth hung in the air between us, bitter, unavoidable. Before she could reply, Mom walked in, her gaze bouncing between us like she'd interrupted a conversation she'd been eavesdropping on without sound. "Kitchens are too small for fighting," she said weakly. "We're not fighting," I replied. "We're just finishing something." Mom reached for my hand, her grip softer than it used to be. "Anna, she's trying." "I know," I said, pulling my hand back gently, "but healing doesn't come on demand, and forgiveness isn't owed, not even to family." Mom looked down, shame flickering across her face, and for once she didn't argue. The next few months unfolded like chapters in a book I'd been too afraid to read. Nora struggled, really struggled. Her ex-boyfriend Tyler filed for primary custody of their son, pointing to her unreliability, her unstable finances, and her parents' dependence on her. The court sympathized. She got visitation, but strictly scheduled and supervised. Her hours at work were cut again. Debt piled up. Eventually, she had no choice but to move into her old bedroom. Same pink walls, same childhood trophies collecting dust. It was strangely poetic. The golden child returning to the nest she'd once been crowned in, now stripped of the illusion that had protected her. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents shifted in a way I never expected. My father became gentler, more present, more curious. He asked about my job at the agency, listened when I talked about campaigns I was leading, told me he was proud of my promotion. Proud, a word I never thought I'd hear from him. Mom wasn't perfect, but she was trying. She'd send me articles about prenatal vitamins when she found out Evan and I wanted to start a family. She invited me to lunch. No Nora, no pressure. She apologized again, this time without excuses. "I thought I was helping your sister," she said once, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were strong enough not to need us as much." I exhaled slowly. I shouldn't have had to be strong all the time. She nodded, tears gathering. "I know, and I'm sorry." It didn't fix everything, but it was the first real step they'd ever taken toward understanding the damage they helped create. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I was leaving my parents' house after checking on Dad's meds, something I now did only occasionally on my schedule, when Mom followed me to the car. "You know," she said, wringing her hands, "I worry about what will happen to Nora when we're gone." The old pressure tried to settle on my shoulders, the familiar weight of responsibility my parents had trained me to carry. But I shrugged it off this time. That's not my burden, I said calmly. You had 40 years to teach her how to stand on her own. Mom swallowed, nodding slowly. There was no argument left in her. I slid into the passenger seat where Evan was waiting, his hand warm against mine. He knew that moment meant something deeper than it sounded. It meant I was finally stepping out of the role they had shoved me into since childhood. Life began to take shape in a way that felt like a quiet sunrise, slow, steady, full of warmth I didn't trust at first. I thrived at work. Evan and I went to Hawaii for a week, our first real vacation without a cloud of family duty hanging over me. I rekindled friendships I'd neglected for years. We started planning the nursery for our first child, a daughter. The thought of raising a little girl tugged at something tender inside me, a promise, a vow, that she would never feel invisible in her own home, that she would never equate worth with exhaustion, that she would never mistake survival for love. I visit my parents sometimes, but on my terms. I bring Evan. I stay only as long as I want. I leave when I feel the familiar ache begin to stir. I don't hate them, but I don't owe them the endless well of forgiveness they expected for decades. Some wounds close, some scars stay. Some stories don't get rewritten. They just end differently than they began. Nora still lives with them. Last I heard, she's working part-time at a T-Mobile store and trying to get more visitation with her son. My parents help her, but the excuses have stopped. They see her clearly now, maybe for the first time. As for me, I'm finally living a life where I am not an afterthought. I am not the backup daughter. I am not the fixer or the forgotten one. I am whole. I am loved. I am building a family where the cycle ends. And if you grew up in a home where your worth was measured by what you could carry, even while someone else got praise for lifting nothing, then I need to ask you. If your family ignored your pain for years, then suddenly begged you to fix everything again, would you stay or would you finally walk away?